I am an African. I take pride in the achievements of this continent and the food safety systems that grew from this land. I've been in the meat industry for almost 20 years now. Studied just about every aspect of the trade. As a production manager, I am absolutely relentless in my demand for food safety and for proper rules to be followed. I study every element in the greatest of details and I apply it vigorously. People who work with me complain that I'm too relentless in my application of the different principles, that I am too literal in terms of my interpretation of the science, that I'm not somebody who easily bends the rules. Yes. And so when I came to Nigeria, I was first of all horrified with what I saw, because it went absolutely 100% against everything that I believed. But as the years went by and I kept coming back to this great country, what first upset me and what first irritated me and what first repulsed me changed from interest to an intrigue to absolute amazement, because I didn't see the outcomes that I was always told would follow if I don't religiously follow the system as I was taught in South Africa and in the United Kingdom. I didn't see people dying in mass from foodborne diseases. I didn't see products spoiling on the retail shelves overnight. In fact, I saw the same shelf life of food as in Western countries, as in South Africa or in the United Kingdom. Fresh meat that lasts for many days, for weeks. And it started to amaze me, because I knew how the animals were being slaughtered. Until I started looking at Nigeria with completely new eyes, and that the African food system is something that has been in place over many eons of time, through many millennia, by their view of nutrition, food safety, and there is a very specific food safety system in Africa. And the way that they use cattle and supply the masses with beef. From into Nigeria, supply through Niger, through Chad, through Cameroon, through the Fulani tradesmen. There's massive markets up in the north that supplies into Lagos and into Nigeria, in southern Nigeria. And these markets didn't come about just overnight. It came about over many millennia. And to simply disregard this and to say that this is an illegitimate system that's effectively and safely developed to supply millions of people in West Africa, and just to discard this completely is a huge mistake. And so the first point that I was trying to make in the previous video that I did is to say that Africans should be proud of their achievements and they should be proud of what they have. Own it, embrace it. Don't be ashamed of it. There's no reason to be ashamed of it. It is yours. It is your ancestors who developed it. It is your forefathers who, through many, many years of careful observation and tweaking of a system, arrived at where we are today. So don't be ashamed of it. Don't think that it is anything less than the best food safety system that's available out there. The entrepreneurs today need to make a decision whether they want to build meat plants to impress people, or do they want to build meat plants to meet the need of the people and to make money. My contention will be that in the first place it should be to make money, because only in this capitalist society, in this structure, can there be enough reinvestment. Do you want to feed the masses? If you want to feed the masses, then invest in processing technology that brings local crops into meat processing. So if you want to invest in feeding the local population and supplying to the needs of the local people, downstream there are unbelievable opportunities, for example in modified starches and texturized vegetable protein, TVP, that can be produced locally. There's no reason for the raw materials to be exported outside the country and to be utilized by foreigners to produce these things. The technology is available, and the wonderful thing about technology is that it is becoming easier every year. Where huge capital investment was necessary in the past, there is not huge capital investment necessary these days to do many of these things. And so we can bring the technology home, as it were, and we can use very clever technology to achieve monumental results in terms of processing raw materials and bringing it within the province of meat science and within meat technology. Get someone to design your plants who don't have a Western mindset per se. Get people to design your plants who look at the environment and say what is available in the environment that we can invest in the food processing plants that you want to set up. Design for profits. Don't design to impress. When I say design for profits and don't design to impress, don't go overseas and look at European factories and English factories and American factories and Chinese factories and Russian factories and come back with that mindset and say we want to build those type of factories in Africa. Go to those factories and learn the principles of production that they use and come back with the principles of production and employ people who can sit down and think for themselves and apply those principles in a different way, in an appropriate way for the environment, for the time, for the place where you want to set up that food factory. Find people who can think for themselves. Get somebody with that mindset to tell you, who brings principles over and learn from the principles in other countries, not necessarily in the how. Forget about the picture of those big plants that they built there. Forget about the picture of the abattoirs that they built there. Come home with the principles. Sit down with a team of meat professionals. And meat professionals, not just with the butchers, bring in the meat scientists, bring in the microbiologists, bring in the various disciplines, the processing technology experts, and sit down and look at what we have in Africa, look at what we have in West Africa, and see how we can tweak that, how we can improve, building on what has been done through generations. Let's not discard the system. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Yes, we can always improve on it, and I will hope that we will improve on it. But do you want to cancel? Do you want to put a line through what has been done in the past? Or do you want to use that as the foundation and build on that? The slaughtering of the animals, the raising of these huge herds is something that took millennia to develop. It is something that is happening. Can you imagine if we sat now and there were not animals being bred in Niger or in Chad or in Cameroon or in the north of Nigeria and brought to the south? What will it take for people to sit down and imagine the type of effort it would have been to plan all of this and to come up with this whole kind of an idea? But the concept exists already. People are doing it already. It is happening already. We don't have to design that. What we can do now is take what exists already and we can build out of that. My plea will be build processing plants. Build further processing plants. Look at the crops that is available in your area. Build processing plants for those crops that can be used as complementary to the meat sciences. Bring them into the sausage formulations that we come up with. In fact, process those crops in a way that can be used by food scientists and export that into the rest of the world and generate extra revenue from that. Build for profit, don't build to impress. I want to give you an example of this where the opportunity to have contact with a company from the early 2000s who took Ukrainian and Russian technology and they used that technology to basically use a salt and a process called electrochemical activation of water to produce a very powerful disinfectant and a mild degreaser cleaning agent. I was able to take this into a very advanced food factory in Nigeria. And I did some comparisons with the South African factory today with a colleague of mine. And I learned that that company spends around 3,500 euros per month on cleaning chemicals. If I take this Russian and Ukrainian technology and I apply this in Africa, I can do the exact same job for just over 1,000 euros. For cleaning, replaces 3,500-4,000 euros of expenses in terms of cleaning. But it uses a complete new way of thinking about cleaning chemicals than we did in the past. So that same principle we can use when we look at the slaughtering of animals and when we can look at food safety and when we can look at the hygiene at the abattoir situation. And we can come up with the same results with vastly cheaper labor rates and cheaper production cost as we have in these mechanized plants that people go and look overseas for as examples. My plea is for Africa to not discard what was done in the past, but to embrace it. South Africa got their first constitution. Thabo Mbeki did a speech, and this is how I started this segment as well, to say that I am an African. I will never forget the day when he read the speech in Parliament. It was one of those highlights of my life. It's a beautiful speech. It's well written. I want to read a section of this to you. I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys and the mountains and the glades, the rivers and the deserts, the trees, the flowers, and the ever-changing seasons that defines the face of our native land. I am an African. I owe my being to the Khoi and the San, whose desolate souls haunt the great expanses of the beautiful Cape. They who fell victim to the most merciless genocide our native land has ever seen. They who were the first to lose their lives in the struggle to defend our freedom and independence, and they who as a people perish in the results. As a country, we keep an audible silence about the ancestors of the generations that live, fearful to admit the horror of a former deed, seeking to obliterate from our memories the cruel occurrence which, in its remembering, should teach us not and never to be inhumane again. I am informed of the migrants who left Europe to find a new home on our native land. Whoever their own ancestors, they remain still part of me. In my veins course the blood of the Malay slaves who came from the east. Proud dignity informs my bearings. Their culture is a part of my essence. The stripes they bore on their bodies from the lashes of the slave masters are a reminder embossed on my consciousness of what should never be done. And in the last paragraph he says, I am an African. I am born of the people of the continent of Africa. And I will add to that instead of despair and shame, I see legendary civilizations with profound knowledge. In this field of meat science, nutrition and microbiology, in my chosen fields of interest, I see evidence of a profound understanding of these three merging into practices. Please, do not shun your heritage. Embrace it. Make your past generations and your ancestors proud. Don't turn your back on what has been done. Look at what has been done. Look at the principles that we can learn from the rest of the world, including the West, including England, including China, including Russia. Let's take those principles and bring them into Africa with a mindfulness and through people who can think and analyze and who can look around themselves. In South Africa, I have a team of researchers working with me who has this single-minded objective to bring these things to fruition in Africa. Most of them are in their 70s and 80s, and they have a lifetime of research behind them to draw from. Open your hearts to these people and to the technologies that they can bring to your country. Let's set up the processing plants, not just meat processing plants, but processing plants for soya and for ground nuts and for various grains that we find in this region. Open your lands and your centers of technology and your universities and your entrepreneurs, where you can show the rest of the world that what Africa has achieved over millennia is not simply being erased by the West. It is not simply being erased by leaders from our country who go abroad and come back impressed by the big buildings and the machines and the mechanization that they see there, completely missing the principles that brought about that mechanization and those big buildings. Let's take the principles that those mechanizations and big buildings are built according to and bring the principles back into Africa and use that same principles to find real African solutions for African problems. We have a unique heritage. Do not discard this. That's my plea.